Hello, I was returning home, thinking that everything was going according to the usual scenario, but a stranger was waiting for me outside the house with a strange request. "We need to talk about your wife." I smiled, thinking it was a joke, but one photo changed everything. But it's not that simple. It's not just a betrayal. It's part of a big game where I'm just a pawn. Are you ready to find out the truth? This story will shock you. The evening had a familiar, comforting routine to it. I parked the car in the lot outside our building, feeling the satisfaction of another day well spent. My work as a project manager wasn't glamorous, but it brought stability, a kind of stability I cherished. Megan was at a late meeting, or at least that's what her last message had said. I always trusted her. We had no reason not to trust each other. But tonight, something felt different the moment I stepped out of the car. It wasn't the cool November air biting at my skin or the distant hum of the city. It was something intangible, like a shadow lurking just beyond the edge of my perception. I couldn't shake the unease as I approached the building. Then I saw him. A man was standing by the entrance, leaning against the wall, his figure partially obscured by shadows. He looked out of place, unfamiliar. The neighborhood was safe and we all knew each other here. But I didn't know this guy. He was in his 30s, maybe early 40s, with a rugged look and a worn leather jacket that seemed out of season. He watched me with an intensity that sent a shiver down my spine. "Anthony?" he asked, stepping forward before I could reach the door. I froze, taken aback by the way he said my name. He spoke it like he knew me, but I had no idea who he was. "Yeah," I replied cautiously. "Do I know you?" He gave a small, almost apologetic smile and extended his hand. "My name is Nick. I don't think we've met, but we need to talk. It's important." I didn't take his hand. The grip of unease tightened around my chest. "What's this about?" I asked, my voice edged with suspicion. "It's about Megan," he said quietly, his gaze never wavering. My first instinct was to laugh it off. This had to be a prank. One of those strange, elaborate jokes our friends might pull for a laugh. But there was no humor in Nick's eyes. They were dark and serious, almost pitying. "Look," I said, forcing a chuckle. "I don't know what game you're playing, but you've got the wrong guy." "I wish I did," Nick murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. He pulled out his phone and began scrolling. "I don't expect you to believe me, but you need to see this." He turned the screen toward me, and my world stopped. There, on his phone, was a photo of Megan. She was sitting at a table in a restaurant, laughing. Her hand rested on the shoulder of a man I didn't recognize. They were close, too close. And then it hit me, it wasn't just any restaurant. It was our restaurant. The one we went to every year on our anniversary, where we'd shared so many intimate moments. "What is this?" I demanded, my voice louder than I intended. A couple passing by glanced at us before quickly looking away. Nick kept his gaze steady, his expression filled with a kind of sad understanding. "It's real, Anthony. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't." I felt a rush of blood to my head, the heat of anger mixing with the icy chill of betrayal. I took a step closer, grabbing the phone from his hand. "Who is this guy? And why do you have this?" "His name is Tom," Nick said evenly. "He's not just anyone, and neither am I. I'm here because you deserve to know the truth. Megan has been seeing him for months." The world seemed to tilt beneath me. I stumbled back a step, needing the wall to steady myself. "This is insane," I muttered. "Megan would never do this. She loves me." Nick sighed, shoving his hands back into his jacket pockets. "I thought the same about her once," he admitted. "But I was wrong. I didn't come here to hurt you, Anthony. I came because I've been where you are. I was manipulated by her too." "What are you talking about?" I spat, the words laced with disbelief. "You're saying you know her? How?" Nick hesitated, looking down as if he was searching for the right words. "I was one of her patients," he confessed. "Years ago, she helped me through a tough time, or at least I thought she did. Now I realize she was using me, just like she's using him." "You're lying," I snapped, shoving his phone back at him. I wanted to believe that this was all some kind of sick joke. But the image of Megan laughing with that man, Tom, was burned into my mind. Get the hell away from me. Nick didn't flinch. He just nodded, almost like he expected this reaction. I get it, he said softly. You don't want to believe me, but when you start putting the pieces together, remember this conversation. Remember that I tried to warn you. He turned and walked away, disappearing into the night before I could say another word. I stood there, my heart pounding, staring after him until he was gone. My hand clenched into a fist around my phone. I wanted to call Megan right then, demand she explain herself. But a small, quiet voice in the back of my head told me to wait, to be sure. I needed proof, real proof. The short walk up to our apartment felt like a marathon. My legs felt like lead, my body moving on autopilot while my mind replayed the image on Nick's phone over and over. By the time I unlocked the door, I was shaking. I dropped my keys on the table and went straight to the kitchen, pouring myself a drink with unsteady hands. The whiskey burned, but it did nothing to dull the pain that was slowly setting in. I tried to tell myself it was all a lie, that Nick was some disgruntled ex-patient with a vendetta. But deep down, I knew there was truth in his words. The distance I'd felt growing between Megan and me wasn't my imagination. Her late nights, her guarded conversations, pieces of a puzzle I'd been too blind to see. And now I couldn't unsee it. The front door creaked open, and Megan's voice filled the silence. Anthony? I'm home. I set down the glass, forcing a smile as she walked into the room. She looked the same, beautiful, confident, like nothing was wrong. But for the first time, I saw the cracks in her mask. Hey, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. How was your meeting? She hesitated, just for a fraction of a second, before answering. It was fine, just ran a little late. I nodded, watching her closely. You must be tired. Exhausted, she agreed, turning away to hang up her coat. I watched her, the woman I'd shared my life with, and for the first time, I felt like I was staring at a stranger. My mind screamed at me to confront her, to demand the truth, but I swallowed the urge. Not yet. I needed to be sure. Let's go to bed, I said, my voice almost mechanical. Megan glanced at me, her smile warm but strained. Yeah, let's. As we walked to the bedroom, I realized the distance between us was no longer just emotional. It was a chasm, a void filled with lies I hadn't even begun to uncover. And for the first time, I wasn't sure if it could ever be bridged. I woke up the next morning with a dull ache in my chest, as if the weight of what Nick had told me had pressed into my very bones. Megan was still asleep beside me, her breathing slow and even. She looked peaceful, almost angelic. I wondered how she could sleep so soundly while my mind was a storm of questions and doubts. Did she know what I had seen? Did she suspect that the seeds of her betrayal had already been sown in my mind? I slipped out of bed as quietly as I could, my movements slow and careful. The last thing I wanted was for her to wake up and ask what was wrong. I wasn't ready for that confrontation. Not yet. I needed more than a stranger's photo and a gut feeling. I needed evidence. Proof. In the kitchen, I poured myself a cup of coffee and stared out the window, watching the sun rise. The world outside looked the same as it always did. Cars rolling by, joggers on their morning runs, the neighbor's dog barking at the mailman. It was all so painfully ordinary, and yet everything felt different now. I couldn't shake the feeling that the ground beneath my feet was no longer solid, that everything I thought I knew about my life was slipping through my fingers like sand. My phone buzzed on the counter, pulling me out of my thoughts. I picked it up and saw a text from an unknown number. Nick, if you're ready to know the truth, I can help, but you need to move fast. She's good at covering her tracks. I stared at the message, my heart pounding in my chest. How did he get my number? And why was he still trying to help me? It didn't make sense. I typed back a quick reply, my fingers trembling. Me, what do you want from me? The response came almost immediately. Nick, I don't want anything. I just think you deserve to know who you're married to. Before I could respond, the door to the bedroom creaked open. I quickly locked my phone and looked up to see Megan standing in the doorway, yawning and stretching. "You're up early," she said with a sleepy smile. "Yeah," I muttered, forcing a smile. "Couldn't sleep." She walked over and kissed me on the cheek, her lips soft and warm. Felt like a mockery, like she was playing a part in a script I hadn't been given. "I'm going to shower," she said, turning away. "Okay," I replied, watching her disappear down the hallway. The moment she was out of sight, I unlocked my phone and dialed a number I hadn't used in years. Kelly picked up on the second ring. "This is Kelly." "Kelly, it's Anthony," I said, my voice lower than usual. "I need your help." There was a pause, then a small sigh. "It's been a while, Anthony. What's going on?" I hesitated, unsure how to even begin. "I think Megan is cheating on me," I finally admitted. Saying the words out loud made it feel more real, like I was sealing my fate. Kelly was silent for a moment. "You're sure?" she asked quietly. "No," I said. "That's why I need you. I need to know for sure." "I'll take the case," she said without hesitation. "But you have to be prepared, Anthony. If I find something, it's going to hurt." "I know," I whispered. "Just do whatever it takes." Kelly agreed to meet me the next day, and I ended the call just as Megan walked back into the kitchen, her hair damp from the shower. "Who was that?" she asked casually, drying her hands on a towel. "Work," I lied. "They need me to come in early." She gave me a sympathetic smile. "I'm sorry, babe. That sucks." "Yeah," I said, feeling the lie twist in my gut. "It really does." I met Kelly at a small cafe downtown. It was the kind of place where no one would look twice at two people having a quiet, intense conversation. She looked the same as I remembered, sharp, confident, with a no-nonsense air about her. She slid into the booth across from me and gave me a once-over, her eyes narrowing slightly. "You look like you haven't slept," she said bluntly. "I haven't," I admitted. "I need answers, Kelly, and I need them fast." She nodded, pulling out a notepad. "Tell me everything. Start from the beginning." I told her about Nick, the photo, the suspicions that had been building in my mind for weeks. Her pen scratched across the paper as she took notes, her expression focused and unreadable. When I finished, she looked up at me, her eyes filled with a kind of pity I didn't want to see. "I'll start with surveillance," she said. "Follow her, track her movements. We'll see if there's any truth to what this Nick guy told you." "And if there is?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Then we'll find out who she's seeing and why," Kelly said simply. "But Anthony, you need to prepare yourself for the possibility that this isn't just about an affair. If what Nick says is true, it's something bigger." I swallowed hard, nodding. "I just need the truth, Kelly, whatever it is." She stood up, tucking her notepad back into her bag. "You'll have it," she promised. "But it won't be easy." The following days were a blur. I threw myself into work, trying to keep my mind occupied, but it was useless. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart leapt into my throat, expecting another message from Kelly or Nick. At night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling while Megan slept soundly beside me. I watched the rise and fall of her chest, the peaceful look on her face, and felt a wave of bitterness wash over me. How could she look so serene while my world was falling apart? On the third day, Kelly called me. "I've got something," she said. "We need to meet." We met in the same cafe, but this time her expression was different. She looked troubled, almost reluctant. She slid a folder across the table to me. I opened it, my hands shaking. Inside were photos, dozens of them. Megan meeting a man outside a hotel, their bodies close, their hands brushing together. Another photo showed them entering the hotel lobby, laughing, oblivious to the world around them. My stomach lurched as I recognized him. It was Tom, the same man from Nick's photo. "There's more," Kelly said, her voice grim. "I did some digging on Tom. He was involved in a scandal a few years ago, manipulating people with false claims of mental illness. Megan was the one who testified on his behalf, helped him get off without any charges." I felt like the ground was falling away beneath me. "Why would she help him?" I whispered, staring at the photos, unable to tear my eyes away. "I don't know," Kelly admitted, "but it's clear they have a history, and whatever it is, it's not good." I closed the folder, my hands clenched into fists. "Keep following them," I said through gritted teeth. "I need more." The days after meeting Kelly passed in a haze of disbelief. I went through the motions of daily life like a ghost, present but disconnected. Each time Megan kissed me goodbye before leaving for work, I felt the cold bite of betrayal. Her touch, once comforting, now felt like a knife twisting in my gut. I couldn't look at her without seeing those photos. The way she smiled at Tom, her hand resting on his arm as if it belonged there. I knew I couldn't keep this up forever. Something had to give, and soon. The silence was eating away at me, and I felt like I was drowning in it. So I decided to find Nick again. He was the only one who seemed to know the full picture, and I needed answers. Answers that I couldn't get from anyone else. We arranged to meet at a small bar on the outskirts of town. It was a dimly lit place, the kind where people went to be left alone. I arrived early, taking a seat at the back where I could see the door. My leg bounced nervously under the table as I waited, my mind racing with 1,000 questions. When Nick finally walked in, he looked different. He was more tense, his eyes darting around the room before they landed on me. He slid into the seat across from me, folding his hands on the table. "You came," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. He gave a small, tired smile. "Of course I did. You deserve to know the truth, Anthony. But I need to know. Are you ready to hear it?" I leaned forward, gripping the edge of the table. "I don't have a choice," I snapped. "Just tell me what's going on." Nick took a deep breath, running a hand through his hair. "Megan isn't who you think she is," he said quietly. "She's not just having an affair, Anthony. She's been using her position as a therapist to manipulate her clients, people like me, like Tom. She knows how to twist our emotions, make us trust her, and then she takes advantage of that trust." I felt the air leave my lungs, as if I'd been punched in the stomach. "What are you saying? That she's some kind of con artist?" Nick nodded slowly. "Yes, in a way. She's been doing this for years, Anthony. She picks her targets carefully, people who are vulnerable, who need help. She gives them just enough to reel them in, and then she starts taking." My mind reeled, trying to process his words. "Taking what?" "Money, influence, whatever she can get," Nick said, his voice hollow. "She helped Tom avoid prison because he was useful to her. And now, she's using him again, just like she used me." I sat back, shaking my head in disbelief. "No," I muttered. "No, that can't be true. Megan wouldn't do that." Nick's expression softened, almost pitying. "I didn't want to believe it either," he admitted. "But I've seen it with my own eyes. She's not the woman you think she is, Anthony. You have to face the truth." I wanted to scream, to throw my drink across the room and storm out. But I couldn't deny the evidence. The photos, the late nights, the way she'd become so secretive. All of it lined up with what Nick was saying. I took a deep, shuddering breath and leaned forward again. "Why are you telling me this?" I demanded. "What do you get out of it?" Nick's jaw clenched and he looked away. "Because I was once like you," he said softly. "I trusted her, and she ruined my life. I lost everything because of her. And I can't just stand by and watch her do it to someone else." There was a raw sincerity in his voice that made me pause. For the first time, I realized that Nick wasn't here out of spite or revenge. He was trying to save me from the same fate he'd suffered. "Then help me?" I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Help me prove it." Nick nodded, his expression hardening. "I will. But you need to be ready, Anthony. The truth is going to hurt. More than you can imagine." The next morning, I called Kelly and told her everything Nick had revealed. I expected her to dismiss it, to say it was all speculation. But instead, she went quiet. "Kelly," I prompted, "what are you thinking?" "I think he's telling the truth," she finally said. "I've been digging deeper, and I found something. There are records of large, unexplained transfers into Megan's account. They started about a year ago, right around the time she started seeing Tom again." I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. How much money are we talking about? Thousands, Kelly said. Maybe more. It's hard to trace all of it, but there's definitely a pattern. And there's one more thing, Anthony. I found her diary. My breath caught in my throat. What do you mean? It was hidden in her office, Kelly explained. She keeps detailed notes on her clients, personal, manipulative notes. And there's a section about you, Anthony, about how to keep you in the dark. I felt like the floor had fallen out from under me. Send it to me, I whispered. I need to see it for myself. An hour later, I was sitting in my car, parked outside our apartment building, staring at the scanned pages of Megan's diary on my phone. My hands shook as I scrolled through entry after entry. She had written about her sessions with Nick, with Tom, about how she could exploit their weaknesses. And then I saw it, my name, scrawled across the top of a page. Anthony doesn't suspect a thing, the entry read. He's too trusting, too naive. I just need to keep him focused on his work, keep him feeling secure. If he starts asking questions, I'll distract him. He's easier to handle than the others. I dropped the phone, staring out the windshield as the realization crashed over me. She had played me like a pawn, manipulated me just like the rest of them. Our entire marriage, every kiss, every shared laugh had been part of her plan. The sound of a car door slamming jolted me back to reality. I looked up and saw Megan stepping out of her car, smiling as she waved at a neighbor. She looked so normal, so composed. But now I knew the truth. She wasn't my wife. She was my enemy. I took a deep breath and stepped out of the car, forcing a smile onto my face as I walked toward her. Hey, babe, I called out. How was your day? She turned to me, her smile bright and warm. It was good, she said. Just the usual. Yeah, I replied, slipping an arm around her waist. Just the usual. But as I held her close, I knew that everything had changed. The woman in my arms wasn't the person I thought she was. And soon, she would know that I wasn't the same man she thought she could control. I could barely recognize my own reflection as I stared into the bathroom mirror that evening. The man looking back at me had dark circles under his eyes, a haunted look that hadn't been there just a few weeks ago. I splashed cold water on my face, hoping it would shock me into clarity, but the feeling of betrayal clung to me like a second skin. Tonight was the night. I couldn't pretend any longer, couldn't play the part of the oblivious husband while the truth gnawed away at my sanity. Megan was out, as usual, at another work meeting. The irony of her excuse stung more than ever now that I knew the truth. I sat in the darkened living room, the silence of the apartment wrapping around me like a shroud. The diary lay open on the coffee table, the pages filled with her neat, precise handwriting, each word a fresh cut into my already bleeding heart. When I heard the key turn in the lock, my heart pounded so hard it felt like it might break through my chest. I watched as Megan stepped inside, her face lighting up with a smile when she saw me sitting there. Hey, honey, she greeted, setting her purse down. You're home early. I didn't return her smile. Yeah, I said, my voice cold. I thought it was time we had a talk. Megan's smile faltered, and for a split second, I saw something flicker in her eyes, fear. She recovered quickly, though, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear as she walked over to the couch. Oh, what's going on? I didn't respond right away. Instead, I picked up the diary and held it up for her to see. Her face went pale, all traces of her usual composure slipping away. Where did you find that? She asked, her voice strained. It doesn't matter, I replied, standing up. What matters is what's inside it. Your little experiments, your manipulation. It's all here, Megan. Every detail. She took a step back, as if the book itself might bite her. Anthony, please, she began, but I cut her off. Don't, I snapped, my voice louder than I'd intended. I could feel the anger boiling over, years of love and trust crumbling away to reveal a raw, seething rage beneath. Don't lie to me, not anymore. I know everything. About Tom, about Nick, about the money. You've been using me, using everyone, haven't you? Her eyes filled with tears, but I wasn't sure if they were real or just another act. I can explain, she whispered, her voice trembling. Explain, I repeated, laughing bitterly. Explain how you've been cheating on me? How you've been using your job to manipulate vulnerable people? How you've been playing me for a fool this entire time? Megan wiped at her eyes, smearing her mascara. She looked so small and fragile in that moment, but I couldn't let myself feel pity for her. Not after everything I'd discovered. Yes, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Yes, I did it, but it's not what you think. Not what I think? I took a step closer, towering over her. You've been lying to me, stealing from me, using me, and you want me to believe there's some kind of good reason for all of it. She sank onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. For a moment, all I could hear was the sound of her ragged breathing. When she finally looked up at me, there was a strange calmness in her eyes, like she'd made peace with something. It was never supposed to go this far, she said softly. I never wanted to hurt you, Anthony. Then why? I demanded, my voice breaking. Why did you do it? Megan let out a long, shuddering sigh, as if she were carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders. Because I needed control, she confessed. I needed to feel like I had power over my life, over everything. My work, it gave me that. Manipulating people, getting them to trust me, to depend on me, it was intoxicating. And then there was Tom. He was just another pawn at first, but then her voice trailed off and she looked away, unable to meet my eyes. Then you fell in love with him, I finished for her. She nodded slowly. I thought I could handle it. I thought I could keep it separate from us, from our marriage. But it got out of control. I felt a fresh wave of nausea wash over me. You're a monster, I whispered. You ruined people's lives for your own amusement. And you ruined us. Megan flinched as if I'd slapped her. I loved you, Anthony, she insisted, her voice desperate. I still do. You don't know what love is, I spat. If you did, you wouldn't have done this. You wouldn't have betrayed me like this. For a moment, we just stared at each other, the silence between us thick and suffocating. Then, she took a deep breath and stood up, smoothing down her dress as if she were preparing for a speech. You're right, she said calmly. I don't know what love is, but I know one thing. I'm not the only one who's been lying. I frowned, taken aback by the sudden shift in her tone. What the hell are you talking about? She gave me a sad, almost pitying smile. You really think I didn't know about Nick? About your little meetings with Kelly? You think I didn't see this coming? My blood ran cold. What are you saying? I knew Nick would come to you, she continued, her voice almost gentle now. I knew you'd start digging. I wanted you to. This was all part of the plan, Anthony. I stared at her, unable to process what she was saying. You're lying? I managed. But even to my own ears, the words sounded weak. Am I? She asked, tilting her head. Think about it. Why would I leave the diary somewhere you could find it? Why would I make it so easy for Kelly to trace the money? I wanted you to know, Anthony. I wanted to see how far you'd go to uncover the truth. My hands clenched into fists at my sides. You're insane, I whispered. This was all some kind of game to you? Yes, she admitted, taking a step closer. But it was more than that. It was a test. And you failed. I couldn't hold back the rage any longer. I grabbed her by the shoulders, shaking her. You destroyed our life, I shouted. You destroyed everything. She didn't resist. Instead, she looked up at me, her eyes clear and unflinching. No, Anthony, she said softly. I just showed you the truth. You were the one living a lie. I pushed her away, disgusted, and stepped back, breathing hard. We're done, I said through gritted teeth. I'm filing for divorce. You're going to lose everything, Megan. Your career, your reputation. And you deserve every bit of it. She smiled then, a small, sad smile. Maybe, she said, but at least I was honest with myself. Can you say the same? Without another word, I turned and walked out the door, slamming it behind me. The cold night air hit me like a slap in the face, but it felt like freedom. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. But as I walked away from the life we'd built together, I couldn't shake the feeling that I hadn't won. Megan had lost everything, but somehow, she'd managed to take something from me too. My faith, my trust. And I wasn't sure I'd ever get it back. The next morning, I woke up to an unfamiliar silence. The apartment felt cold and empty without Megan's presence. But I knew this emptiness was just the beginning. I lay in bed for a few minutes, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of the decision I'd made last night. There was no going back now. I had filed for divorce before I even came home last night. Kelly had all the evidence needed, and by this evening, Megan would know she had lost everything. I rolled out of bed and made my way to the kitchen. The sun was shining through the blinds, casting long shadows on the floor, but it did nothing to lift the gloom hanging over me. I poured myself a cup of coffee, but it tasted like ash in my mouth. The life I'd built with Megan, the years we'd spent together, it all felt like a cruel joke now. Everything I thought I knew had been a lie. The buzzing of my phone pulled me out of my thoughts. It was Kelly. I answered it, my voice rough from lack of sleep. "Yeah? It's done," she said simply. "The papers have been filed, and I've contacted the authorities about the fraudulent activities she's been involved in. They'll be investigating her financial records, her manipulation of patients. By the end of the week, she'll be facing charges." "Good," I muttered, though the word felt hollow. Kelly hesitated. "How are you holding up, Anthony?" I let out a bitter laugh. "I'm not sure," I admitted. "I thought I'd feel relieved, but all I feel is empty." "That's normal," she said softly. "You've been through a lot. It's going to take time." "Yeah," I said, rubbing a hand over my face. "Thanks for everything, Kelly. I don't know what I would have done without you." "You're welcome," she replied. "Take care of yourself, okay? This isn't the end. It's just the beginning of something new." After we hung up, I sat there for a long time, staring at the blank wall in front of me. Kelly was right. This was the start of something new. But what kind of future could I build now, when everything I believed in had been shattered? A week passed and I moved out of the apartment. I couldn't stay there any longer. It was filled with too many memories, too many ghosts. I found a small place on the other side of town, a quiet spot where I could start fresh. I spent the days packing up our life into boxes, sorting through what was worth keeping and what needed to be left behind. It was like going through the rubble after a storm, trying to salvage what little remained. Then, one evening, as I was finishing up the last of the packing, I received a message from an unknown number. At first, I thought it was another spam text, but then I opened it and saw the name at the bottom. Jenna. Jenna had been one of Megan's former patients, someone I'd only heard about in passing. The text was short and simple. "Jenna, I heard what happened. I'm sorry. I was one of her victims too." My heart skipped a beat. I hadn't expected to hear from anyone else involved in Megan's twisted games, but something about the message felt genuine. I hesitated for a moment before replying. "Me? Thank you. I didn't know she had manipulated you too." A few seconds later, my phone buzzed again. "Jenna, it wasn't just me. There were others. I thought I was the only one until I started piecing it together. I can't imagine what you're going through, but if you ever want to talk, I'm here." I stared at the screen, feeling a strange sense of connection. Here was someone who understood, someone who had been hurt by Megan in the same way I had. It was a small comfort, but it was enough to make me type out a reply. "Me, I'd like that. Let's meet." We agreed to meet at a small cafe on the edge of town, a place I hadn't been to before. When I walked in, I spotted her right away. She was sitting by the window, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea. She looked up as I approached, giving me a tentative smile. "Anthony?" she asked, standing up. "That's me," I said, offering a small smile in return. "You must be Jenna." We shook hands, and I took a seat across from her. For a moment, we just sat there in silence, unsure of where to begin. But then Jenna took a deep breath and started talking. "She ruined my life," Jenna said quietly, looking down at her cup. "I trusted her, and she used me. I thought she was helping me, but all along she was manipulating me for her own gain. I know the feeling, I said, my voice rough. I've been trying to understand why she did it, but none of it makes sense. Jenna looked up, her eyes filled with a kind of sadness that mirrored my own. Some people are just like that, she said. They take pleasure in control, in seeing how far they can push others. It wasn't about you or me. It was about her need to feel powerful. We talked for hours, sharing stories of our experiences, piecing together the puzzle of Megan's deceit. It was painful, but it was also healing. For the first time since this nightmare began, I didn't feel so alone. Jenna understood in a way no one else could. As the sun set and the cafe began to empty, we found ourselves sitting closer together, our shoulders almost touching. There was a warmth between us, a connection that felt new and fragile, but real. When I walked her to her car, we paused, lingering in the quiet. "Thank you," I said softly. "I didn't realize how much I needed this." Jenna gave me a small, sad smile. "Me neither," she admitted. "It's nice to feel like I'm not alone in this." Without thinking, I reached out and took her hand. She didn't pull away. We stood there, holding onto each other in the fading light. Two broken people finding a glimmer of hope in the wreckage of our lives. Months passed, and the investigation into Megan's actions moved forward. She lost her license, her reputation, everything she had built on a foundation of lies. The last I heard, she was leaving town, running away from the mess she had created. Part of me felt relief, but another part felt nothing at all. It was as if she had taken a piece of me with her, a piece I wasn't sure I'd ever get back. Bye-bye.